Hello class, this is Mrs. Smith again. This is our last instruction set for our introductory lecture notes over Beowulf. So you'll notice on the screen here, I have an image of a mead hall. The mead hall was the primary gathering place in Anglo-Saxon times, and we actually have evidence of the importance of mead halls still today in our own time period. For example, like courthouses and things are always in the center of town. But let's go ahead and do some important motifs, and then we'll talk about the mead hall a little bit more later. So one important motif that you're going to want to make a note of so we have good versus evil and the concept of bravery. Another important motif, of course, is this mead hall, which was considered like the home or the sanctity, the central gathering building for celebrations and meetings and safety. And I want you to think about how our courthouses today are located in the center of towns for safety purposes. It goes way back to gathering together, having a central location for everyone to come together. Sometimes mead halls were places for celebrations, weddings, funerals, big feasts, political meetings, but sometimes they were a gathering place where safety in numbers prevailed. So people would gather in the mead hall, close all the doors and lock them to keep intruders from reaching the public. So another motif that we have is something called weird, and it looks weird, and it's spelled weird, and it sounds like the word weird, W-Y-R-D. Weird means fate or destiny, and epics, especially Beowulf, often brings up the question, how much control do you really have over your fate or your destiny? And a lot of times the Anglo-Saxons like to believe that they had a lot of control. But when they didn't have control, or when they couldn't have control, a lot of times it was up to the gods to prevail. We see that quite a bit in the Odyssey. How much free will do you really have versus how much is just luck or fate or destiny? And that is what we call the weird. You'll see the motif of religion come up. During this time period, paganism was just beginning to dissolve, and Christianity was beginning to take over. And we're going to see that in the epic. You're going to see where monks would insert their Christian beliefs while they transcribed the epic, and those transcriptions will just appear out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you're talking about Christian values, and you're like, wait a second, when was this written? But that's because the transcriptions happened so much later. But we're also at a time period where the concept of maybe one overarching being or God was starting to take root, and deities were not quite as prevalent as they were in the past. But again, you're going to see a blending of the two. Another important motif is loyalty, both to family and to your companions. But because there's so much loyalty with your family and your companions, you're also going to see a lot of boasting and bragging about what you do well, putting you above others, about your loyalty. But loyalty is always key. If you say you're going to do something, then you got to do it. Journeying, the big quest, going on a journey, going from point A to point B in order to accomplish something. The idea of the journey we see in the Odyssey. The word Odyssey itself means a big, long journey, a big, long trip. And so we find that in the epic here with Beowulf too, where our hero moves from multiple places in order to accomplish his goal. But we also see that carried through in things like Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit, where there is a quest or a journey, a quest for the Holy Grail in Arthurian legend. We still have the traveling from point A to point B to get something that we want. And finally, the motif of storytelling, the preservation of traditions, lessons, and a culture through the art of telling stories. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit in here about poetic devices, the things that we're going to focus on the most in the lesson. The first poetic device is the kenning. So kennings are metaphorical compound words, and they were used to great extent in Old English and Old Norse poetry. They function as a way to make an ordinary noun sound more descriptive or awe-inspiring. So they create kind of this hyperbole. For example, the whale road would be like the sea. Like we noticed Seamus Heaney talk about the joy wood or the glee wood, and that meant harp. We're going to talk about assonance. Assonance is the repetition of the same or similar vowel sounds within words, phrases, or sentences. So I pulled an example for you from Beowulf, and if you just listen, you can hear bestowed upon Beowulf both sets of gifts. So we can hear the O sound in bestowed and the O sound in Beowulf and both, and we've got those three in a row, and it gives it kind of a sound quality. We're also going to study alliteration. In alliteration, words that begin with the same sound are placed close together. Although alliteration it often involves repetition of letters, most importantly, it is a repetition of the sound. So bestowed upon Beowulf both sets of gifts. So we can hear that B sound. But the key to understanding the difference between assonance and alliteration is the placement of the sound. With alliteration, the sound happens at the beginning of the words, and with assonance, it's a vowel sound. It happens in the middle of the words. And the last poetic device we're going to focus on in this particular piece is imagery. Imagery is language used by poets, novelists, and other writers to create images in the mind of the reader. Imagery includes figurative language, metaphorical language, to improve the reader's experience through their senses. So the concept of being able to enact the mind's eye and to be able to visualize something while you're reading is what we call imagery. But how do we get to the imagery? Well, a lot of times it comes from the kennings, the assonance, and the alliteration. So those poetic devices all kind of work to establish that imagery. Notice the first three are sound devices that we have. The last one is totally like visual or the six senses, the sound quality, the imagery that we see in our head, how we visualize the story as it's being told. Okay, so that's the end of our instruction sets. We've got instruction set 1, 2, and 3. I think it's time for us to just go ahead and begin, and you'll get some more instruction as we go through the story. So go on to your SWIC and then go on to your first activity. Good luck.